Second regular meeting of the Stoughton Area School District Board of Education. Ms. Egan, could you please take the roll?
Yes. Mr. Buban?
Here.
Mr. Coughlin?
Here.
Mr. Fry?
Here.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Here.
Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Ms. Sword?
Yes, here.
Mr. Sullivan?
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Here.
Ms. Genter?
Here.
President Jerks?
Here. Thank you. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, the board would entertain any public comment. If you want to address the board, could you please come up to the podium, give us your name and your address, and try to keep any comments to 3 minutes if you can. I don't see anyone moving forward. So we'll move on to the next thing, which is the legislative update. Donna?
If you could just give me a minute to pull it up. Last week I was at the convention most of the time, I went to a couple of legislative updates. I went to WASB's and also to the SAAs, which is always a really good one. The superintendent's, what is the second A for Administrative Association. And so what I just did is I attached their report in a scan form just so you have that. The big deal, which maybe Jonathan will share with us later on, is that the delegate passed a resolution just like ours about voucher transparency, which maybe hopefully now many school districts will follow. But the bad news is it's probably not going anywhere. But it's good to bring that out. And then Governor Walker did come to the convention on Friday morning and spoke. And I tried to put a little synopsis in there about what he said. Everything is peachy, giving more money to public schools than they've ever given before, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So if you've got any questions on anything that I put in there, it really wasn't about any bills per se, but it was just kind of mainly a recap of what WSB did over the session. Oh, and the legislative breakfast, which I attended for CISA 2, which was really great. It is all the school districts of CISA 2, the superintendents were invited, and then also a legislative liaison. So Tim wasn't able to go. I was there, and Sandy Pope was there talking about the Blue Ribbon Commission. Senator Taylor was there. Our Senator Miller was there. And then Don Barunik was there, and then a Janesville representative. Good information and a good start, and this is going to be something that's held on a monthly basis. So we'll see what transpires in the next few months, but really trying to act strategically and to work with them to talk about ways that we can move some things along.
All right. Any questions or comments about any of that? All right. Thank you, Donna. Next up, Spotlight on Learning. I'll turn it over to Tim.
And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Tara and Fonda, who are two mentor teachers, to kind of introduce kind of what you're about to see.
Hi, I'm Tara Hutchins. I'm one of the district mentors. And I'm Fonda Lewis, one of the district mentors also. And this evening prior to the board meeting, we had just a little celebration dinner for our new teachers that we have in our district. They survived their first semester, you know, and I'm sure all of you have done like a job for the first time or remember that first year stepping in, and you know, so it's always tricky that first year through the jobs, but it's pretty exciting, the new teachers that we have in our district. They bring lots of energy, innovation, and just creativity to our district.
Tara and I reached out to many of the new teachers' teammates, people they work most closely with, and asked those exact things. What does the new staff member bring to the team? What would we not have here in Stoughton if this new person was not here? And as you can see, as the slideshow kind of rolls through, Tara and I put our own ideas from working with these people, also along with what their teammates said, into the slideshow.
really appreciate just the continued support that the district has shown for our initial educators, and just hopefully that, that just continues to grow.
And this is the second time I've been in the mentor role, and it's been about 5 or 6 years, I don't know, since I was in it before, and the program has just grown in such a fabulous way since the first time I was in the mentor role, and it's exciting. And with Tara and I collaborating together, we're really seeing a lot of great support that we can give to the new teachers and watch them grow and keep them here, we hope. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Dr. Onsager's report.
Thanks, Scott. Couple things that I have. First of all is some dates. Next week, Tuesday, which is the 30th, I believe, we have Facilities Committee. And on there, at that time, the 1892 Coalition will be presenting a report and a recommendation. They've been working at a recommendation for, I think it's 2 years now, maybe it's a year and a half, 2 years, about recommendations of what they believe should be done with the building next door. So if you're available for the Facilities Committee to hear what their recommendation is. February 5th, why we have a little different schedule in February. We did that so on February 5th people could attend the Pops concert. If you haven't been to the Pops concert, it is a treat. It's showcasing our best and our brightest and our most talented individuals. So if you have a chance, please stop in the Pops concert. Also in February, you can look forward to a presentation, and I kind of gave you a little teaser about the Innovation Center idea. We'll have a presentation about that. And as we were preparing for that, and as I was thinking about all the different things that we have going on that involves innovation or partnerships with the community, it is quite amazing. And I have a partial list, but there is a lot more. Everything from the Fab Lab, which you all know of, and I believe we mentioned this last July, maybe, or June or July, that last year we had 118 students from the class of 2017 that were awarded over $238,000 in scholarships. What a tremendous partnership with our community. We've also partnered with area businesses to provide our students with youth apprenticeships in the fields of manufacturing, engineering, healthcare, veterinary medicine, auto repair, food service, banking. We also, if you remember, have a student who is working with a researcher, one of the leading experts in genetics in carrots, what you eat, at the UW, international expert. What great experiences we have for our students there. Expanding opportunities, as we were talking about the technology with the one-to-one, with a Chromebook for every 6th to 12th graders. Innovative classrooms, which have led to 21st century learning spaces, play-based and inquiry-based kindergarten, starting at Kaganza, and personalized learning. If you remember, we accepted a grant to improve or to expand Fab Lab and some of the curriculum and the tools into the middle school. So we're in the process of that. Over the last couple years, we've added electives and opportunities at River Bluff, including Spanish and German, and we have our students going to language villages for weekend language immersion. We have our students going to Washington, D.C. and other great field trips and experiences at the middle school. At the high school, we have 26 extracurricular and co-curricular activities, which include strong academic teams, math team, mock trial, forensics. Quiz Bowl has qualified for national 6 consecutive years. Excellent fine arts program, choir, band, orchestra, has toured Carnegie Hall, New Orleans, Boston, etc. Award-winning student newspaper that we heard about last board meeting at Spotlight on Learning. We have leadership opportunities through student government, mentoring and community programs, and we're expanding our health program. We're one of the, We have a CNA program where we have roughly 22 students every year get their CNA license. And we're one of the few high schools that students can actually take the CNA exam at our high school. They don't have to go somewhere else to test. And that's a collaboration from Scotland, from the hospital, and many other great things. And we're looking at doing more internships, et cetera, with health careers. And that is just scratching the surface of what we've been able to accomplish with the support of our community. So I'm thankful for our community and their support and their investment in education.
All right, questions or comments on any of that? Millie?
Just as you were saying, talking about the CNA program, do we have, I'm sorry if I don't remember if we do or not, do we have a program like that in place for educators, like people that wants to go into education?
We do not, but it's something that we are looking at the high school, which you'll hear more about this from Mr. Cruz and members of the high school coming up in the next month to 2 months. We're looking at more career pathways. We're looking at more opportunities for students, and we're starting with the health careers because that's the one we're farthest along, but looking at engineering, looking at all the different paths, and how do we do that, and how do we get students experiences while they're still in high school on some of these, whether it's job shadowing, whether it's internship, whether it's some sort of youth apprenticeship, because as I've said, if you want to go into a profession, and you have that experience in high school, isn't it great if at the end of that experience you say, yes, this is exactly what I want to do, but it equally as great if you say, no, that's not for me. I thought I wanted to do that, but I found out in high school that I'm not really cut out for that. So that's where we're headed with the high school. So I envision that eventually we will be having some sort of program like that. I think as we get down the road and as there is a shortage of educators, the colleges that have education programs are all cutting back because they have about 50% less people going in education now than there was 8 years ago. And so I think we have to talk about if we have some strong people who want to go into education, of investing in them. And how do we get, maybe we sponsor them with scholarship, or we give them some, whether it's volunteer or whether it's they work as subs or whatnot, for a commitment to come back here, and how do we work that out? But I think those are all conversations we need to have in the future as we continue to look at different programs.
Yeah, I think that it will be great. We can look into partnering with any of the colleges around and kind of do a bridge.
Right.
Because of exactly what you said.
I would also like to, pursue more partnering to see if we can get with UW-Whitewater to see if we can possibly get, even for student teachers or practicum, more minority candidates or more minority people wanting to go to education that maybe work in our district, whether it's their practicum hours, whether it's their student teaching, as a way to maybe start opening the door of Consider Stoughton, et cetera. As our population gets more diverse, our teaching force and our education force, we should be getting more diverse as well.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, next up is the consent agenda. Julie?
And the constable. So the consent agenda for January 22nd, move approval of the January 8, 2018 regular board meeting minutes. Move approval of the January 4th, February 12, 2018 check register in January 12, 2018 P-card transaction report as presented. We would like to say thank you to the following individuals and groups and move approval of their donations to the district. $2,014 from the Chip In for Meals event, Joseph and Stephanie Huck. $20, Eric and Gina Beckman. $25 Thor and Beth Anderson, $50 Level Up Fitness, $579 Matthew and Patty Kruger, $50 Scott and Jennifer Holm, $20 Jeffrey and Ann Shervin, $30 Linda and James Link, $75 Christina Gehring, $40 Brian and Amy Call, $150 Paul and Ellen Musowski, $50 Matt Hanson and Jill Ginther, $30 Randy and Elise McLary, $15 Tamara Kemkin Mary, $25 Tracy Marsh, $20 Matthew Brown, $50 Michelle Helen, $25 Casey Conlack, $50 Jeffrey and Emily Moyer, $100 Jeremy and Kendra Epler, $60 Sam and Alicia Speck, $15 Tamara and Dan Gallagher, $20 Kathy and Randall Rosima, $25 Andrea Plain, $25 Felicia Greenwood, $50 Jill and Nick McHone, $30 Michael and Nicole Smithbeck, $30 Craig and Brenda Hunt, $25 William and Kirsten Goods, $100 Randy and Donna Olson, $100 F&P Fast LLC, $30 in Stoughton Hospital, $100 to be used for meal for students in need. $2,000 from Corinne A. Fierro for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $2,000 from Todd Lynn for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $2,000 from Abraham and Beth Jadcott for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $1,649.30 from the Viking Bowl V-Ball Club for an open donation to be determined, $1,300 from Foxbury Working for Kids for Portion Seat RIF Books, $1,000 from Mark A. Lynch for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $1,000 from Sandra Yates for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $1,000 from Gwendolyn M. Corvin for the Myron Fosdell Memorial Scholarship, $1,000 from the American Legion Post 9 for American Legion Scholarship, $2,008.88 from Innovative Heights Madison LLC, Sky Zone, for the River Bluff, Washington, D.C. trip, $200 from the Hartson Assisted Living for Stoughton High School supplies, $150 from Margaret Racebeck for the Stoughton Norwegian Dancer Tour, $27.30 from Skybridge America for playground equipment, outdoor classroom lumber from Tangiment Tree Care LLC valued at $850, 9 new books in the Little House series by Laura Ingalls Wilder from the Litchicks Book Club for the Foxbury LMC valued at $148.95, $200 from the Hartson Assisted Living for Stoughton High School supplies, and a related cash donation budget adjustment for $15,549.48.
You're doing great.
Almost there. I move to approve budget revision for the increase of the Title III grant in the amount of $503 and to approve budget transfers in the amount of $23,767 for building, department, and grant budgets. I move to approve the retirement of Becky Felstead, Director of Human Resources, effective June 30, 2018, and professional educator retirements of Lee Watner, River Bluff Music Band teacher, and Alice McKenzie, River Bluff Reading teacher at the end of the 17-18 school year. In addition, move approval of the professional educator resignation of Margaret Delafield at the end of the 17-18 school year.
So the consent agenda has been moved for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
from Tim. Any discussion?
President Dirks, I had two donations, one donation listed twice.
Oh, okay,
$200 from Heart Song Assisted Living for high school supplies.
okay.
That's a mistake. I'd like to correct that.
Okay, thank you. With that correction, are you still willing to
Yes,
second
second.
it? Okay, and you're still willing to move it for approval?
Mhm.
Okay. Any discussion from anyone? Is that a yes, John?
Oh, no, sorry. Wrong one.
Well,
Only that I don't like number 5.
yeah, there are a couple of people leaving, and it's sad to see them go, and of course, we thank Ms. Felstad for all the work that she's done over the years here. She's going to leave behind some big shoes to fill. Not that you have big feet, because you don't.
But they are very stylish.
They are. Stylish, big shoes. Thanks, Don. Any other comments? All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up, we have a presentation under our discussion items regarding Building Bridges Mental Health Services.
All right, so it's just, yeah, that'll be fine now. Just an update on Building Bridges. So I'm Kelly Melker, Director of Student Services, and this is Kathy Mora, our Clinical Coordinator, and Eve Bertrand, our Service Coordinator for Building Bridges. So I will go ahead and just get us started, and they'll tell you a little bit more about what they've been doing in the buildings and what their roles look like. So I'll just tell you a general overview of the program. So it really is a shared county and district program to help support students with mental health needs. The program's emphasis is to build a bridge between the school and the family to support the child's educational success and social emotional well-being. The program really started in 2014, and it was created by the Dane County Executive with just 3 districts, and now it has expanded to 9 districts by adding Mount Horeb, Oregon, Stoughton, and Waunakee this past fall. So it started in Madison, Verona, and Sun Prairie were the 3 initial districts involved. So services are provided by the 2 staff. They're hired by Catholic Charities as a shared cost between Dane County and the local school district, and in this case it's Stoughton. There we go. Yay. So students 4K through 8th grade are referred by, we have point people in each building at individual schools during set referral periods. Our first one was September 1st through October. And then this next referral period is from January 1st to February 1st. So services are provided to students, school staff, and families by the clinical coordinator and service coordinator. Data is collected by both the school and Catholic Charities. So starting in next fall, we'll have a full year of parent and staff surveys. We'll also analyze attendance and behavior referrals, and then Catholic Charities provides quarterly reports. So we'll have a lot more data beginning next fall to share with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eve and Kathy, and they can explain a little bit more about their roles.
Okay, great. So that was a great introduction to our program, and we just want to share a little bit more detail about it. So our program description, we provide 90 days of intensive wraparound support to students in 4K through 8th grade with mental health needs and their parents or guardians. Oh, I talked to them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So should I
if you
start
would,
over?
I was just going to say.
because
Okay.
otherwise the podcast
Won't
doesn't
catch
pick up
it.
what you're saying.
Okay, sorry.
right.
Kelly did a great introduction about our program, and so now we can talk about it a little bit more in depth. Our program description is that we provide 90 days of intensive wraparound support to students in 4K through 8th grade with mental health needs and their parents or guardians. We are here for students experiencing mental health challenges that exceed what available school resources can address. And we're also here for students who may benefit from short-term case consultation or case management, as indicated by at least 2 of the following: behavioral issues, academic issues, attendance issues, or home and/or community issues. Under behavioral issues, you'll see internalizing or externalizing. Just to explain that, that's a whole other presentation, but in short, externalizing is outward behavior, so that might be kicking or yelling or things like that, and internalizing behaviors are, anxiety and depression and things like that. Yes. So in terms of the description of our roles, so Kathy and I work really closely together for each case, each child and parent that we work with in school. In my role, so I'm Eve Bertrand, MSW, which is Master of Social Work, and I'm the service coordinator. So I work with the parents or guardians and provide case management. And case management can look like a lot of different things depending on what the individual parent and child are needing. So that could be referrals to mental health providers, that could be help in setting up transportation, and just overall connecting the family to any kind of supports that would be helpful to them in the community. We are parent guided, and we work to develop sustainable plans for going forward.
My name is Kathy Mora, and I'm the clinical coordinator. I work with the school staff and with the children. When I'm getting to know the child, I like to sit in on the classroom and observe what's going on, maybe what the problems are, how they interact with other students and the teacher. Then I gather the information and I discuss it with the teacher. Then I work with the teachers and counselors, and I modify or develop a new behavior plan, develop crisis management safety plans as needed. I provide school staff, or even I together, provide school staff with trainings on trauma-informed interventions, either individually or in groups. And we provide the consultation staff to teachers or school staff as needed for a specific student. Instead of taking in a referral for the 90 days, they might need just a one-time consultation. We provide that also. And the referral process, we receive a referral from the teacher. The teacher gives the referral to the point person at the school, and then the point person submits it to Eve and I along with a signed consent from the parent. And then we set an appointment with the school, which is usually the principal, teachers, point person, anyone involved with the student, and discuss the strengths of the student and what's been tried, what are the problems, and what they'd like to see done. And then Eve and I discuss it, and if it's a good referral, then Eve will call the family or the guardian and set up an appointment where we'll go there and discuss with the family in their home or in our office, wherever they're comfortable, and discuss all the same issues. What's going on at home, what are the problems, what have been tried, what do they feel like they need. And if it's a referral that we will take, that's a good referral, then we will draw up a service plan. Eve and I discuss the goals and the plans and the process, and then the outcome, hopeful. And then we'll have the parent sign it, and that begins the 90 days of service. So this is 12 students we serve at a time. In the fall, we have 12 referrals. We're in the process of closing some, and then the new referral period is starting, so we're getting new cases for the spring, 4K through 8th grade. And
so we also wanted to share some survey results. So we don't, of course, have Stoughton-specific survey results yet. We will eventually, as Kelly mentioned at the beginning. But we have, this is the 4th year of our program, so we have results from last year, quarter 2, 2017, the parent guardian survey results. One of the questions was, after working with the Building Bridges team, I know where to go to get my child mental health support. And 100% of parents and guardians who filled that out agreed, which is great because that's one of the goals of our program. And then one of the other questions was, after working with the Building Bridges team, I know ways to support my child in school, another goal of our program, and 100% of parents agreed. So we've seen, and that's just an example, but we've seen a lot of positive outcomes from our program. So that's all we have, and we just wanted to open it up for questions.
Donna?
You mentioned when you get a referral, and then if it's a good referral, what does that mean?
An appropriate referral. So basically, if the child and parent are fit for our program, in terms of
Wanting to have.
yeah. So like basically, if they fit the requirements of like the, I don't know how to explain it.
I think there's an attachment in the papers.
Yeah, we brought more information in writing, so you have it all in writing.
Okay.
But basically, like if a child has mental health issues and they could use the help of our program, then they're appropriate for our program, essentially.
And it's completely voluntary for parents, so parents don't have to, even if their child, we have to get a consent, but they can still decide, I know I'm not going to participate, so.
Right, so if the parents are ready and willing and able to do the program, then they would be a fit for the program. But if a parent says, you know, that the school referred me, but I don't really want to do this, then they wouldn't be an appropriate referral, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Thank you.
John?
So does do the mental health services and support exist entirely within the school with this program, or do you guys refer them to outside? Okay.
Yes.
Could you
e-works,
could you
if that-
elaborate
if you
more,
wanna
some
explain.
of the,
Yes, so in my role, I'm doing a lot of connecting.
Mhm.
So I'm really connecting the student and the family to mental health services in the community.
okay, great, thank you.
Because a lot of times we can, make some of those recommendations
Mhm.
as school personnel, but Eve walks them through the
Yeah.
process. She might even help them make the calls or get them to their first appointment, things like that. So
Excellent.
there's a lot more support
Great.
in guiding parents through the process.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Frank?
I was looking at the description of roles and saw that you provide school staff training on trauma-informed interventions. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
That's a big one. That's a big
the answer is
question.
no.
That's a huge presentation, yeah.
So, I don't know where to
It's
start
really
with
like,
answering that.
it's like the core of our field is being trauma-informed. So being able to meet the children and parents where they're at in terms of like what they've gone through. So any type of trauma that someone might have gone through, like we are trained to meet people in that place.
Right, there's homelessness and poverty, and some parents have been incarcerated. There's all sorts of issues, and abuse and neglect, all sorts of issues that go in that have created trauma for this child.
For example, one example I know that we had talked about or that I've learned about, let's say a student has had some, maybe watched abuse in the home or has had some abuse issues. So we want to work with staff to say, that child, you may not want to hug or touch without giving them warning. Or we may have to respond a little bit different. Just to kind of guide through, if they're having a really hard day, these are how staff can help respond.
Right.
And that's how Kathy will help support them through some of that process as she learns more about the student. Does that help?
Okay. Isabel?
So you mentioned that it was for 4K through 8th grade students. Is there something similar implemented for high school students?
I don't know the answer to that. No, there's
No.
not.
If only we had endless, funding for social services, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, would it ever be possible for this to be implemented at the high school?
That would be up to Catholic Charities and funding. So we got our funding through the county, and that would be something to advocate for at the macro level politically.
It's actually
Definitely.
restricted by the county, because the county exec is the one that started this program. And it was really for preventative services, hopefully, to get things started and rolling. And they felt hopefully high school students have had a lot of those preventative services along the way. So when they started the program 3 years ago, that was the concept. So it's really the county determining this is what the program would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
In your presentation, you mentioned there are 12 students served. Were there more referrals than 12, or was that?
Not in the first referral period, there was not more than 12.
Okay, so we accepted everybody who, okay. I was curious about the resources, if there were more people than that applied that we couldn't serve, how we might remedy that, but that's not an issue, right?
So, yeah,
No.
and we know that they will not take more than 12.
Right,
So
right.
the team got together and really looked at all the kids, talked through the students and their families. So yeah, there were some on a wait list to say if some of the parents didn't sign consent, that kind of thing, or they can be first up for this next round. So we'll serve 12 more this semester from January 1st. So some of those kids that were kind of on that wait list have moved over to this next referral period.
Okay, so that was my question.
Yeah.
There were more than 12 referrals, but you could only take 12.
We can only take 12.
Okay.
So we don't refer.
Okay.
We put them on a
sorry.
waiting list, so
I
we don't get
I
that
may not be
referral.
using the proper terminology, but there was
Yeah.
there's a referral form, and then the consent to referral.
That has to all be in place before we even take it.
Got it.
The
Okay.
parents need to consent to the referral and everything
Okay.
to start the
Okay.
process. So we can't move on any of the referrals
Okay.
until we have consent.
So if I understand correctly, what you're saying is right now capacity is 12 at a time?
Per semester, yes.
Okay.
And our goal is to serve the highest level of needs, like the highest level of
Right.
mental health needs. So we pick, we have an awesome team that picks out the students who are struggling the most.
Okay. But with more resources, there would be more kids who could use the help, is that
There
fair
are
to
always
say?
more people who could use
Okay.
mental health support.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what
I
I
think
was
that's
thinking.
what Steve was
County,
getting.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah.
Scott, yeah.
Okay.
But again, the county is setting this limit.
Right.
Right.
12 per semester
Okay.
is as much, but there's consultation services that they could provide, it's just not that 90-day.
Right.
And
Got
it's very intensive support that we provide.
Okay. Joe, did you have a question?
Yeah, how common is it for parents to refuse the service?
I don't know how common it is. We don't have very many. If they refuse the service, it doesn't get to us. So they refused it on the school level. So the referral doesn't come through to us. So we didn't see that. So I don't know.
And I think it was, my bet, it was less than 10%.
But there are some kids that need help that their parents are not
Yep.
accepting.
And we have to accept that, and maybe,
I understand, it's just frustrating.
maybe we can get them in on the next round or next fall as we develop. We're hoping to develop, especially from our own parents from that survey, guidance to help say to parents, you know what, this is really a great program, and having other parents give that kind of information and share it with parents, maybe that would be less apt to. But it's a lot of time on their part too, for Eve to guide them through.
Yeah, it's a big commitment for the parent because I'm working with them, weekly, and if a parent's not ready for that,
Well, I guess that brings up another question. Do you have people that get into this program and don't end up being willing to do the work that it's going to take? I mean, does everybody finish?
Well, so one thing is, we just finished our first 12 students and parents. We have a small sample size. But yeah, I think there are varying levels of engagement based on where parents are at in their journey,
Thank you.
Anybody else? John?
So since this program is funded external to our school district, is there any sort of life expectancy on it, or is there a limit to, or that we know of?
As often as
or-
much as we want to continue to fund
Really? Okay.
and share the cost.
Oh, cool.
So at this point in time, I don't think, and how much the county executive wants to continue to budget for it. So it's kind of that dual role. They really want to open it, they wanted to open up to more school districts and expand. So it's the school districts reaching out and saying, yep, we really want to be part of this program, we're good to go. But then the county exec has to have the budget. So it's really relied on him. They are starting with Medicaid reimbursement, so that might start help lowering the cost for the program, and maybe it can be expanded further, but that might also give more longevity if they're getting a different source of funding. So, and I guess that's going well right now. They just started, I think this was the first semester that they did. So, and had a lot of success with that. So they're hoping for the next round, the budget may, the cost may start decreasing to districts and the county.
Okay, Steve, thank you.
This may be a little bit of a sensitive question, but can you talk about, I know it's offered from 4K to 8. Can you talk about what we're seeing in our first semester? Like what age?
Probably say a variety of students age 4
Across
to
all of
8.
that, okay. Okay.
I mean, it's really, I have to respect the confidentiality.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I can give you general information, we can give you quarterly updates, but.
That's okay.
Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks very much. It's good information.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, a report on our innovation grants.
Good evening. I have two teams of people that are coming to speak with you this evening. Both teams were recipients of the innovation grant that is several years old now. They presented this information during our State of the District address last Monday, a full in-service day. They started out and shared this with their colleagues, followed by Dr. Onsager's criteria for the next round of innovation grants that we hope educators are considering as we speak. So I'll have each of the presenters introduce themselves as they present, and we're going to start out the high school team.
So I'm Anna Schwerke. I work at the high school. I'm part of the English department, and this is...
And I'm Julie Lynch, and I also work for the English department at the high school.
And we also had Laura Striley, who's also part of the English department at the high school, and Kathy Gargano, our media specialist, as well as our librarian. All four of us kind of powwow last year during parent-teacher conferences. Julie had this awesome idea about what we could do for the grant money and kind of build this one place in the high school. So we're looking at the multi-purpose room project, and what we wanted to do is a little bit of background information. So it's at the high school. Space is a precious commodity up there. Teachers are always looking for a large area in which students can do group work, stations, and personalize their learning. So teachers want to collaborate with other classes, but 60 students in one room is too crowded. So we want to kind of get everybody else involved, and we wanted to do some activities because I teach LA Line and she teaches research writing. So we have this kind of differentiation with different kinds of students. So we want to utilize a space where we could go. And so, like again, 60 kids were way too much for one classroom. So in 2016-17, the multi-purpose room was used for book clubs, student senate and key club meetings, professional development sessions, various meetings, and guest speakers and testing. Still, it was unused 106 days last year, and we saw an opportunity to utilize the space in additional ways. So our vision was to retain ability to accommodate testing situations and faculty meetings, things that have been already in place with the multi-purpose room, while also inviting comfortable space that can be used by all staff. Flexible seating, a variety of materials for use in this room, and multiple copies of young adult literature for student use, and then create a space that would increase the reading culture of Stoughton High School. We also wanted to increase student engagement throughout all these things through collaboration opportunities and personalized learning. So here are some of the things that we kind of brought to the table here to make this actually happen. So collaborative seating and lighting, which is easily movable from place to place, nice comfy recliners, or actually it's not a recliner, but just nice chairs to have them sit in. We also have those flexible seating that they can take on the ground, so even if they want to do something outside the multi-purpose room, they can take that with them. And do some reading out in the hallways, outside classrooms. Lighting is always an efficient thing, as my kids always say in my classroom. I love your room because your lighting is so nice. It just is very engaging. And I'm like, yes, it's on purpose. Artwork and paint on the walls as well is nice because it just is a very soothing kind of addition to a room. So Julie spent long, hard hours looking at all our pieces and making sure they all went together. Supplies as well, making sure that we have things that when we do collaborative work, that they are there for the purposes of whatever activities. So we've got dry erase boards to headphones to buzzers to ottomans that are awesome that can keep things in the storage, markers, butcher paper, all that jazz. And then here we have some contemporary books for literature circles. So we implemented some book groups and book talks. And so again, utilizing that space so that kids can go where they want in the room and be able to hear each other. So here we've got a couple other books too. I implemented 3 different books. The Hate You Give, All American Boys, giving kids voice and choice, which they definitely truly enjoyed and liked. And again, collaborating in book talks. So here are the before and after pictures. So again, she went in there and started taping things off and making room for all the things to come in. So it's kind of a process. Again, some pictures on the wall as opposed to the bulletin board that wasn't being utilized. And then again, here is your brick, prison kennel brick on the left-hand side to the nice dark gray, what is it, cruise gray? Very peaceful compared, so a little bit more warming and welcoming than the other gray. So again, another picture of the before and after. Gorgeous. All right, Julie's going to talk about what happened with her and her kids.
All right, I get to talk about the fun stuff, what we got to do in the room, because the room is not just about furniture, and it is aesthetically pleasing, but we've had such a great time designing engaging lessons, and we've really focused on bringing the upperclassmen and the lowerclassmen together and really let them teach one another. This is a picture of my LA 10 students and Ms. Durango's Modern Lit students. And she was telling me, we're going to do some book talks. And I said, well, who are they doing the book talks for? She said, each other. And I said, well, that's not real, too good. They're all reading the same book. I said, could we be your audience? And her students, she said that they've done the best that they've ever done because they had an authentic audience, which was my LA 10. Here's Carly. So here I brought some of my LA, again, my research writing students, and we teamed up with Ms. Striley's LA 10 students to discuss TED Talks. And so each student picked their own TED Talk, and then we put them in groups of 4, and they had to watch each other's TED Talks, and then they had to collaborate and decide which one was the best, and write summary and analysis paragraphs on it. So that was great. We did Socratic discussions, and I think every teacher can attest when you do Socratic discussions in your classroom, you either do one whole class. It's really hard to do smaller discussions because it gets really chaotic and noisy. But the room is really large enough that we can bring 2 classes in here, have 3 huge group discussions, and we can't hear what each other are saying. Here's Mitch. I think the new multipurpose room is good for movers and shakers, so to speak. It provides an opportunity for students to get up and out of the classroom and learn in a unique setting. And we did just that. We held a Christmas party in there. We had a great time. Ms. Gargano facilitated a breakout EDU. I had my LA 10 students spread out and create semantic maps, and we utilized the materials from the storage ottomans. Oh, this is my best lesson of the semester. I like them all, but this one. So Isabel can attest to this. She was in my research writing class. We do a really intensive grammar boot camp, and I always struggle teaching students advanced grammar, and this year I decided we're going to let students teach LA 9 students. So we brought in her LA 9 students, and my students had to teach them colons and semicolons and dashes and repetition strategies like anaphora and epistrophe, and they did great, and my students did the best on their summatives that they've ever done. There's the student senate. And really our biggest problem this entire semester has just been finding a time to check it out because it's become so popular, which is a great problem to have. And on behalf of our entire team, we just want to say thank you for you know, believing in your teachers and providing a platform and money to let us try innovative things, and we really appreciate that. So, thank you.
Well, any questions from anyone, comments?
I just
Go
want to
ahead.
say, I want to go back to high school again.
Well, you can come back anytime. They can teach you grammar. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd want to relive high school, but, no, this is fantastic. I really strongly commend you for not only finding a way of utilizing space that wasn't really getting used half the year, actually more than half the year. But looking at the photographs, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I can well imagine that with this layout, and again, the space that you've got a lot of different things you can do in there. So excellent with some creative thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, John had.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just gonna say that it looks awesome. When I was in high school and we had seminar classes, I always remember spending like a quarter of the class period rearranging desks every single day. So it's good that you guys found a way around that. I'm sure it helps you with time too. So
Maybe we
good
can
job.
do some career fairs in there, get the community members in there. We've got it in our foresight, so.
No, that's a great idea. Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby Alt, and this is Mike Hensgen. We teach 6th grade language arts, red block and yellow block. So we decided to do our grant on student-centered learning and flexible seating. And throughout this, you'll kind of see some of the different pictures of both of our rooms in here. The whole purpose of us doing the grant really was to give kids that voice and choice to be able to work on different curriculum and also work in kind of a space that really a place that they wanted to be in, a place where they were really comfortable. With the curriculum as well, we've kind of given students that access to the curriculum that's either at their grade level or above, so really meeting the students at their present level, at the 6th grade level, and then giving them curriculum that's also above so they can go beyond that. Just to kind of give you some of the background, last year we redesigned some of the language arts curriculum for 6th grade, and within that we really focused on personalized learning. So one of the modules in our professional development was personalized learning. So in that we did a lot of learning on building that common language and brainstorming shared beliefs with the students and the teachers in the room, and really coming up with a common vision. With that then came the designing of project-based learning, so really looking at what are the rubrics that we're asking the kids to kind of follow? How do we know that they're meeting those expectations of our curriculum and our standards? And then what are those I can statements? What are we expecting them to know and be able to do at the end of our units and the end of our projects? So one of the things that it kept going back to with this was the idea of, as we're learning about the personalized learning, as we're redesigning the curriculum, it kept coming back to flexible seating and really putting kids kind of in that place where they felt comfortable, where they were calm, where they were relaxed, where they just really felt good about learning, and just really, being able to dive in and get into the work that they needed to do.
So some of our findings, first, we used the book How to Personalize Learning this year when it came to the school was moving to more of a universal design for learning. And so we kind of jumped on board a little bit before that, and we did some work this summer in regards to this, along with kind of getting all of our curriculum redesigned to kind of match this and go along with it. And actually, it already was. We just didn't have a name for it, right? So that's always fun to know that you're doing something maybe ahead of the game without necessarily knowing it. So we started at the beginning of the school year with the students, and we talked about how they access information, how they engage with that information, and ultimately how they express it. Everyone does those things differently. And so it was really a matter of helping the students find out how they learn best and how they can utilize their time with us in our subject and hopefully in other subjects to utilize and maximize the time they have in the classroom. we want ultimately, like it says there, to develop an expert learner. That's kind of our goal, is to help them, you know, not just be sages with information, but to help them become the best learners they can be. And then building upon their preferences and interests. So we really talked about not only how they access, engage, and express, but also what type of learners they are, visual, auditory, reading, writing type, or if they're really into kinesthetic activities and things of that nature. And so the students kind of gave us their input, and we said, all right, great, now look at what you gave us, and this is who you are. So when we're doing these activities, we want you to think about how are you going to access the information to the best of your abilities based on what you think. It all comes back to student-centered learning. We need them to know how they learn best. Ultimately, it's their education, whether it's here in our classroom or it's outside of the classroom. So we just are there to kind of help them with that and find the right fit for them. Ultimately, they gave us that information. It's all self-directed, mostly self-regulated. We step in when we need to. Basically, it's designed to help them with their learning path as they move forward. Ultimately, as Abby was saying, it's about having a voice and a choice for their learning. We are the co-designers. They are the main drive behind their education. They need to realize that. We want, like Abby says, to have that flexible learning, not just with furniture, with nice couches or stools, counter height stools, or cushions they can use to sit on the floor. But it's also about when they learn best. I was talking tonight with Principal Gates about some of the learners who, you know, today maybe struggle in class, but they have the option later on to do it either on their own time or during, say, lunch. So they have that ability, and we open it up for them, because we know sometimes at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're not awake just yet. They're motivated. That's the ultimate goal for us, to help them motivate in the learning process. We want them to be having fun, but also to make sure that the goal is to learn a new skill, whatever that might be. And then you have to have quality teachers, so we try our best to make sure we hit those marks to be that quality teacher for there in the guide. That ultimately is what we're after. Our class time is basically structured. If you're familiar with Kelly Gallagher, if you're in the language arts or reading, he's the guru that most people go to. We kind of structured use his class structure along with ours and the workshop model. So we have a do now activity. We incorporate some vocabulary right away at the beginning, as well as 7 minutes of writing to build their fluency. And I've seen a lot of gains. I know you have too. Just by having 7 minutes every day for them to write. We give a prompt and they go with it. Whole group instruction sometimes, depending on whatever the activity is that particular day. Small group helps determine if there's any issues we need to go back and reteach. And then there's that individual work time. It allows the teachers to move around and work with small groups if we need to, or individuals as well, while the student is ultimately in charge of their education and using that time wisely. I like to give the students this pep talk beforehand is nobody likes homework, and if you use your time wisely, you're not going to get homework. If you're not using your time wisely, then you might have some, and I haven't had any complaints about that, except for those kids who maybe don't use their time as wisely as they should. Again, that's on them. Then we'll typically have a closing activity too, just to make sure they understand what the purpose is of that particular lesson, and it, again, helps us determine whether we need to do any reteaching. This is a sample of one of our choice boards, something that Abby and I have been working on. She brought this to our attention last year towards the end of the year, and so we really have kind of changed how we do delineate information to the students in terms of projects or information that they can go back and help review at home with the addition of the Chromebooks this year in the 6th grade level. It's great because it gives the students an opportunity at home to revisit anything that maybe they have forgotten or didn't pay attention to in class. That's not the case though, right? So this is an opportunity for them to go back and relearn something if they need that assistance and we can't be there for them. This is time consuming, and again, you can see across the top here for this particular choice board, this was a lesson on pronouns. That's one of the major pushes for 6th grade students. We do have it listed out. What are some of those types of learners? The visual, the reading, writing, the kinesthetic. We've even broken up some of the reading, writing samples into more leveled text, easier text for students who struggle with reading, and then more just right 6th grade or even challenging reading, so they get the option to kind of go with what they need to help them figure out a topic. We always encourage too that if you think you're an auditory learner and you try it and it didn't work, try other types of learning because you might not have understood who you are as a learner. And I know I'm changing all the time myself.
One of the things also with Voice and Choice is the idea of the must-do and may-do boards. So as the class hour goes on the left side of the must-dos, so those are the things that you really have to get done that day. And I really try to focus and keep this updated to exactly what they need to do just in that day so they can see kind of their immediate, this is what I need. On the may-do side is when they feel like they've done all those items on the must-do, they move over to the right side. So those students that may be getting done with work sooner than others or that maybe aren't quite challenging themselves enough, now they can go into more specific items that they're looking for. So adding in some textual evidence and really looking at that reason and analysis rather than just the evidence. So this is just an example of one of the must-do, may-do boards that really focused, and the kids know, I've done all the things on the must-do, and as far as the may-do, can I do this or this? And sometimes they'll ask if they can add something to the may-do, and sometimes it's a matter of, yep, go and do that, or that's really good, I'm going to put that up there so everybody has that. So it's something visually that they come back to as their own checklist. This is a sample of a rubric that as we try to get our students to be expert learners, we're really looking that they're able to create some of these rubrics independently rather than Mike and I always creating all the rubrics. So this is one that I did with the class, and I really just started with a blank box and said, okay, what is it going to look like when you do your presentation to meet expectation? And so we talked about those things that we've kind of been expecting and having them do throughout the project. And, okay, what's that going to look like if they're meeting my expectation? Okay, sounds great. So we filled in kind of a list of items. What's that going to look like if they go beyond expectation? We put those down. And then what if you're approaching, like you're not quite meeting it, but you're really close? What'll that look like? And then the basic, if we're just kind of, maybe we haven't, spent all of our time wisely, we haven't gotten all those items down on paper. So this is something that as a class we created. And then the goal, obviously, then beyond that, as we continue with the expert learners, is that they begin to create some of their own. And with this, they can grade themselves, they can grade each other, I can grade it, and the idea really is that as we're grading one another, that we really should be all meeting those same places, whether or not I grade it or Becky grades it, or you grade it, you get kind of that same general end product. Is this one yours? Go ahead.
Okay. So here you have some images of some of the flexible seating options that are offered in our particular classrooms here. Ultimately, the learner-driven environment needs to have some of that flexible seating because that is the real world. I know that sometimes I do my best work away from this classroom in a different setting than this. And so I might require a couch with a swivel arm tabletop. Or, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner there, we have students who like to sit on the floor and collaborate, and that's fine too. Ultimately, as long as the learning gets done, right, that's what personalized learning is. And so my big thing too when I'm talking to students is to make sure there are no excuses. Don't allow any excuses. So flexible seating is one of these options that you have the ability to find the appropriate seat that works for you, whether it's a group setting of table of 6 other chairs, a couch, I have 2 independent work desks so they can work by themselves too. In a quiet corner, that works for them too, so they have to figure that out, and then there really is no excuse for why maybe they weren't using their time as wisely as possible. We did create some zones too, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a label, if you will. And I know Abby used these a lot more than I do when it comes to the zones, in terms of what we would call them. A lot of times, I think what we use the zones for is when we're working with smaller groups or a few students at a time, and we can say, I need to meet any group member, or I need to meet any students that want more information about proper comma usage in the living room area right now. So the students will then meet us. We also were, with our grant we used this year to buy televisions very similar to that on wheels. Mr. Van High helped us with that, thank you very much. And we can then move those TV monitors to different locations in the room, so we don't have to necessarily have the kids come to a specific location. We can go to them. Abby actually borrowed mine a couple weeks ago so that she could have 3 different stations, which is great. 3 different sets of learners going at one time. And you want to talk about that? I thought this was great.
No, it was great. It was kind of that last minute. I had 3 different groups presenting some of their work that they had done, and I really prefaced with them what it was going to look like. So when you're in this area, you're going to look at this computer, this screen, and this is where you're going to focus your time and attention. We're not going to watch the other groups. And it was kind of that last minute of, okay, if I had just one more TV, and I was like, oh, I'll go down the hall. So I went and got Mike's TV, got it all set up, and it was really neat. I took a ton of panoramic still frames, pictures, because it was really cool to be able to see all the screens, and all the kids were really engaged. I mean, they were in the moment, they were in their group, they were watching, and my initial thing was I was going to stand in the middle and I was going to like watch it, kind of give like a slight grade, as they were presenting to some of them, and I literally stood there in the middle and I had my clipboard and I kept it really close to me and I just spun around. I was watching everybody. I was in awe of the fact that everybody was into their group. They were talking with their group, they were asking questions, they were focused on their group. It was really neat. I mean, I could have sat there and taken video all day just with all the kids. It was really neat. The thing that I love about the different zones for me when I designed the room was I wanted to have 42 different seating options. Not that I always wanted 42 kids in there, but I wanted them to be able to feel like they had enough options that when they came in, they could truly find that best space and place for them for that day. And you can see it when they get into the living room zone, or I have a bubble wall that has kind of white noise motor, but it has LED lights and bubbles that float from the bottom up to the top. To see the kids just get really settled in, to get out their Chromebook, to get to work right away. They're comfortable. They look comfortable. They're relaxed. They look and are acting relaxed. And they're ready to work. It's really neat to see that. And for the kids that have a lot of energy, they're sitting on those energy balls, bouncing up and down, totally focused on exactly what we're doing. So these zones were really created so that if you were the last one in the room, it wasn't like musical chairs and you got the very last seat. So that way the kids still had a lot of options for different and cool places. And if they try and tell me, like, I don't have anywhere to sit, I'm like, really? You could sit, and then I'll sit on all of them and move around. So it's been really neat, and it's great for us, I think, as teachers. We always say, oh, it'd be great if we had the time. And this has been a really neat experience to really feel like we have the time to sit down and work with every individual kid. This year, I have spent more time individually with every single kid than I feel like I ever have in my teaching career, because of the way that the room is designed, the way that we've designed the curriculum, and it's just been a really neat experience to really sit down and get to talk with every student, and we meet them in their zone. If they're sitting on the couch, I wiggle myself right in on the couch as well. So that part has been really neat as far as getting that, really building that relationship with these kids.
So this is some of the statistics and data we collected from the students a few weeks back. 72% of the students reported that they do the may do extensions. So it's not just what they have to do, but they go above and beyond. I can't say that that would have been the case in years past. It would be very difficult to find out at this point, but that's awesome that they are going to go above and beyond. 95% say that they choose their seat based on their needs and their comforts. So they're making the right choice based on their needs. 92% believe that the seating options have a positive effect on their learning. A little bit of a dip, 77% believe that their grades improved. That's okay. I think the big thing for us is the learning is the most important part. And you know, the grade thing will come, but the learning is obviously what we're here for. 15% said it didn't really affect them either way. From our lens, we're noticing a lot less missing and late work. In fact, I was just doing some data collection from the end of the second quarter to the comparison of the first quarter this year, and dramatically, I would say probably a bump of at least 50% less late work than the first quarter alone. So I can see that the students are really taking hold of this and doing their due diligence and using their time wisely. And then also they're using their time more effectively and quickly. As Abby was saying, we can have up the expectations right away at the beginning, the do now expectations. We come in the classroom, the students are already getting to work and doing what they need to do in their locations that they've already predetermined. So it's just a phenomenal change. Not that the students previously in the former classrooms didn't do the same thing, but I think that this is definitely more suited for their abilities.
Kind of that next step for us, really, we talked a little bit about the expert learners, but really going back to that, so making sure that those students are resourceful and knowledgeable, that they're strategic and goal-oriented, and that the things that they're doing and that we're doing are purposeful and motivating. For students, I want the students to be able to use the I CAN statements to truly guide them in their curriculum path and where they're going, so that we can really see that connection between the standards and what we're really looking for them to be able to show us that they can do. I want them to create their own rubrics. And I really want them, we both want them.
This quarter, we're definitely.
Yes, this quarter is a big focus on the rubrics. And then to really have the students view their learning as something that they're doing themselves, rather something that is done for them. So really focusing on putting it on them and us being able to kind of follow along and monitor them as they take their own path. We've been really excited. I think that, the curriculum, matching the seating, it's been really great. It's been a neat experience. That top picture, you can see all 3 screens going. It's been a really great experience. It's been ones where, having the dimmed lighting, I have lighting panels of a forest canopy, and the kids come in and you can just see them, they just sit and stare for a little while, and it really is that great feeling, the paint on the wall, everything that's been included in this really goes back to their ability to just sit down and get going. And it's been a really neat experience, and it's been fun to learn all the ins and outs of it. Any questions?
Alice?
What's the Zenergy Zone? That's a tongue twister, I can't say
The
it.
Zenergy Zone is the Zenergy ball chair, so that green ball chair is technically called a Zenergy ball chair. Not to be opposed with the calming zone, which is really more of that quote-unquote Zen zone, which has the low coffee tables, it has the bubble wall, a bunch of plants, it's very green, green rug, the greenery, some fake plants that my mom had in her basement. But the Zenergy ball is more for the actual name of the chairs.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it's really neat the way you've integrated the curriculum into how you designed the room.
Thank
It
you.
is very nice in there.
Thanks.
Other questions, John?
Has this required a significant change to the content of your curriculum to fit the teaching method?
No, I think it's more about giving us time for planning, more planning and going in and finding just a ton of resources that, before it wasn't necessarily one size fits all, but maybe different tiered, and now we find a multitude of new curriculum to add and give at the students' disposal. I think Abby even brought up too, sometimes the students will bring us information too, like, that's great that you found that, let's incorporate that too. So even the students are taking a hold of this. And we vet a lot of the stuff, obviously, because there's a ton of information out there and you want to find the best information you can, and so that's the most time-consuming part. But there hasn't been a whole lot of change to the curriculum in that regard. It's just a matter of finding more resources for the students to use.
And I think too, even going into this, when we were, last school year, as we've kind of changed over our curriculum here and there, we really were going more to that project base, but without the official name and that official guide. So this really added that time and energy into really taking what we were starting to do and really developing that further. And really letting, us thinking deeper as well as, allowing the kids to think deeper with it as well.
So in transitioning more to project-based, has this changed anything else about the way that you are assessing their learning?
I haven't noticed any change, to be honest with you, about how I'm assessing their learning. This is, again, it goes back to them a lot, and seeing what they can do and what they are, how they learn best. And so it's more kind of an introspective thing that's done with the student, really. And we're kind of there just to guide and make sure that they are indeed getting done what they need to do and stepping when we need to.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say with that is, as we've kind of focused on these I can statements, I see myself wanting to kind of help them create those rubrics and guide those rubrics. And then there is that, that also that thought of, well, how would that look to share that with parents? So how would that look, when they're saying, well, what did you do? What are you good at? How are you doing this? To be able to share those rubrics with them, because, obviously they're just seeing one grade and one number at the end. So really hoping to get, as the kids really, as they design the rubrics, they're going to have that connection to it and really feel more responsible for it, and hopefully then share it. And I always say, put it on the fridge at home. It'll be great. Do you need a magnet? So.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, next up, discussion items, open enrollment seats.
Nope, actually, it's annual report of health services.
Oh, sorry. You're right. I'm really sorry. My eyes are very tired. It's been a long day.
That's okay. I was thinking about leaving. I really was.
No, don't.
I'll stay.
Borrow Tim's glasses.
Okay. Heading out, I'm not going to take it. Okay. Alrighty, thank you for letting me come tonight and give you this information. I am Laurel Griedebeck. I'm the district nurse for the Stoughton Schools, obviously. And I have been the school nurse or the district nurse for over 20 years now. Wow, it's a long time. And it has been a privilege to serve the families and the students here. It's an honor, so thank you. I'm going to, since nursing is my thing, and definitely in technology, I'm still learning. So Becky is going to take care of the balance for me. Okay, so you do have a more detailed health report in your packets, so I'm not going to take too much time, but just wanted to let you an overview of the health staff that we have, and the full-time nurse, of course, and then the educational assistants, health assistants, and just wanted to mention also, in addition to the health staff, do a lot of training with other staff members, administrative assistants and coaches and teachers and EAs, because they go on field trips, etc. So they are taught on many different procedures. So they are kind of health staff also. And in particular, administrative assistants at the elementary level have to provide coverage for the health room because those health assistants are part-time. And while I'm speaking of health assistants, I'm going to give them a little shout out because they're a great group. We are a great team, and I appreciate they're really caring, and they watch my back, I watch theirs, and we're a great group. So shout out to them. All right. The next slide just shows an overview of the health conditions that we deal with in the health room and in the schools. As you can see, there's quite a lot. And just kind of some clarification about what it means for some examples of other significant health conditions. It would perhaps heart conditions, multi-system conditions, cancer. So we see a lot of different health conditions each year. And staff members are trained in a lot of different health procedures that I train and delegate to others to do. for the students. And the next slide is, I did get a little fancy with the presentation. You didn't notice it? I'm learning. I'm working on it. This is just a chart about total health room visits. And we've been relatively stable in our overall health room visits. We have had some decrease in the number of medications we give. That very well could be because of some medications here are just given once a day. So there's been some changes there. But overall, the health visits have been about really stable over the last 3 years. There's more details about building by building. And there's going to be fluctuations in buildings, and mainly it's because of some things we can't control, like the flu, and this year it's not a good year for the flu. Or also there's students in different buildings with different health conditions that, have to come to the health room on a scheduled basis, sometimes multiple times a day. So that might change numbers for different buildings. And, our ultimate goal always is to take care of health needs, but mainly keep the kids in the classrooms so they can be in that wonderful seating. I have cots, but we want them to be in the classrooms learning. So in that, I just want to clarify accident reports. You look at that number and you think, you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot. Just so you know, we fill out an accident report every time the student is injured if they go home. Not necessarily if they, it doesn't have to be if they go to the doctor, but if they do go home, if the parent chooses that option. And if they go to the doctor, of course, for follow-up. So next. Our immunization compliance is again above 99%, which is what we want for the law. So a lot of time, effort, communication on the part of the health staff to get that number every year. Okay. Health screenings, health staff, we do vision and hearing screenings. Every once in a while there's a blood pressure screening here and there for staff and students. But we have a great partnership with the Lions and Lioness they volunteer. We have great parent volunteers that come in and help us. Otherwise, it would probably take me all year to do it. So I appreciate that. And we do vision screening for 4K students, all kindergartners, all second grade, all fourth graders, and we do hearing screening for kindergartners. And of course, anytime throughout the year, if a staff member, teacher, parent wants a screening, I would be glad to do that. All right. Lots of education and training goes into teaching and making sure that those that I delegate to know what they're doing on a field trip or in the health room. So a lot of sessions. I do a lot of training. I have my little kit and I carry that around with me with my demos, and you might see me, showing people how to do an EpiPen or an injection. So also try to provide information through e-news to parents about prevention, wellness, communicable disease. And involved in a lot of emergency and health plans. So as well as getting involved with IEP and 504 teams. Okay. Committee involvement, I just want to point out, yes, I'm on those committees and organizations, but the health assistants also are very involved usually at the building level and sometimes at district level, especially in the wellness committees and the wellness activities. Yeah, you can go next. And then just an overview of some of the accomplishments for the 16-17 school year. And of course that leads to, there's always something to do, always goals. I'm never bored, it's always challenged. The day goes by too fast. And so as far as the next slide goes, some goals, I just wanted to highlight something I'm excited about is like we practice for fire drills, we really should be practicing for medical alert drills. I mean, we do a good response to emergencies over the years, and we do have 911 calls. So I want to just make sure that each building, the teams that respond to medical emergencies have practice. They know what they're doing. We tweak it. We started doing surprise medical alert drills at Kegonsa and developed a plan and tweaked it and did debriefing and submitted all that for Heart Safe certification through Project Adam, and that's coming soon. So that's one building down, and I'm going to work on more. So, and that is, I didn't include a question mark slide, but I'd be glad to. Kind of.
Does anybody have?
Yes.
Can you explain Heart Safe certification a little bit?
That is through Project Adam, and you, we were doing so many of the items on that checklist anyways, like, for instance, we had AEDs in the buildings, we had lots of CPR certified staff, we had emergency response teams. There was just many of the things that when I looked at, I heard about it from another fellow nurse in Sun Prairie, and I said, well, we do all that. Why can't we get, a banner or whatever? And it's also part of the emergency nursing services to do drills. So I'm like, this is a good way to start. And that requires that you do yearly drills, and you have to have at least one that is a cardiac emergency. So we did a surprise drill with a victim of a heart attack who was found unresponsive. So we had a mannequin, and we did that during the school day, and people responded. We had our protocol. So we've checked off everything on that checklist. I've already submitted it. We are certified. It's just the presentation and the formality is next. So the goal is to have every building, and then continue it on and do other drills like for food allergies or a diabetic emergency. So not just heart emergencies, but other ones, different scenarios.
Other questions? Done. Medical alert drills.
Yes.
Would that include anything, I mean, we started the ALICE training, and so I know that there are very simple things that can be done in an active shooter situation that literally saves a life. And I'm wondering if that's something that you've thought about as your goals.
It's not on the goal list, but I should have had it because I'm working with Cal, and he's asked me to look into Stop the Bleed kits.
Yes, that's
Is that what you're looking at? Yeah. So it's the national movement, and looking into maybe not those exact kits. Right now, I've been reaching out with the hospital, got a great contact there, reached out to EMTs, have another contact, just got an email today with another name. So working on, partnership, sponsoring donations to get X amount of kits. So one in each classroom, then of course there's the training, because those would involve, the emergency would likely be a bleeding emergency,
right,
and pressure and tourniquets and things like that. So there'd be training involved for staff, and they're trying to keep the training simple. Also at the state organizational level, there is, and I'm not going to, you would think I would remember, I was just there today, but I cannot remember exactly everything, but there is movement for that type of among school nurses. So yeah, that's very much.
It's super important. I mean, if high and tight, and just being able to stop the bleed saves like 70%.
In my emails to various places, sponsors, I said, in light of the fact we just had ALICE training, and also added those kind of protocols to our first aid, our binder too. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have AEDs all over the place. These need to be like right next to them.
They need to be in the classrooms actually, because what if they're in a situation that they have to be locked down, or it kind of depends on if they've been able to evacuate or not. So if they've had to do the enhanced lockdown.
And I just have one other question related to the trainings. For like choking hazards. I know last year we had a student come and talk to us about how he was at River Bluff and was,
Yes.
being a teacher, was able to help
I
him.
do, yes.
And now I believe that this was something that just happened legislatively, was it not, that teachers are no longer going to be held responsible for providing that kind of care? So I'm wondering if that's something that could be on the radar too, is having teachers be trained for choking hazards, especially if they're in the lunchroom duty.
True. That would be maybe in our first aid, maybe safe schools. I could look that. Can I borrow a pen?
Sorry.
That's okay. Here, let me borrow.
I know it was, I mean, the fact when you have a child come and say, thank you, and I'm really happy that someone saved me, and that had the training, I mean, it kind of sends it home. That
Well,
it's
I
a good
know
thing to
that
know.
educational assistants are CPR and first aid training, they have that, so that would be part of, the choking would be part of that, but are they the supervisors on, you know, that,
Yeah.
maybe the key people? And I know, I could check with,
It may just be as simple as you're, strategizing who's where, when. But it's just good to know that you're looking at all of those
Okay.
types of.
I'm writing down Donna T's name in case I have more questions.
You know where I live.
I know where
so
you live, I know how to get hold of you, okay. All right.
Anybody else? John?
Yeah. How, I'm not too familiar with your department, but how are you guys on staffing?
Okay, I would like, now that you mentioned that, we have, there's one district nurse. We have a health assistant in each building. We have full-time health assistant at the high school as well as at River Bluff. The high school health assistant in the afternoons also serves as does some administrative assistant duties for counseling, as well as, and then the elementary schools, they have, it's 0.82 health assistants at the elementary level, so they are not full-time. So like I was saying, administrative assistants have to cover when they are not there.
Anyone else? All right.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, then, next up, discussion on open enrollment seats. Is that Erica?
Erica and Kelly.
Hi. So every January, we are required to approve the number of seats available for students that want to open enroll into the district. This started, I think this is about our third year that we've done it this way. It was part of, it was a new state requirement a few years ago. So what we do is we look at our current enrollments, both kids that reside here in the district and kids that are open enrolling into the district, look at where they're at right now, roll them forward at grade level, and just look at that compared to how many teachers we have for each of those grade levels, which basically creates the amount of spaces available. One of the things we did this year at the middle school, our target for class sizes at the middle school is 26. If we have 26 in there, we had 2 grade levels where we would not be able to allow any kids to open enroll into the district. So we bumped that up to 28 because we have had the flexibility to go above that target in the past. And we did that for the purpose of allowing, if a family wants to open enroll and they have 2 kids and one of them is in, say, 8th grade, we didn't want to not allow that family to open enroll into the district because the way the math worked on a piece of paper. I will say that, this is something we do in January. We don't know the open enrollment period opens here shortly, and we're estimating what those enrollments and class sizes are going to look like next September. So it's kind of tricky to really look very specifically at what each grade level is going to be. But just given the fact that we are declining in enrollment and we've wanted to accept as many kids into the district as we can, that's why those numbers might look a little bit higher this year than they did last year. So that's how we did the open enrollment for our regular ed spaces, and then Kelly was the one that really kind of took the lead on students with an IEP and whether or not there's space available there.
So what I do every fall, so all the staff filled out what I call special ed matrices. So it really looks at severity, not disability label, nothing like that. So it's how much time the students, do they require extensive specialized instruction? Do they require a lot of aid support, medical support? So we're really looking at global needs per individual student. So what happens is there's 4 categories. There's mild, moderate, extensive, comprehensive. So if a student is in that mild to moderate range based on the score, they are counted as 1 student. If they are extensive, they are counted as 2 students, and if they're comprehensive, they're counted as 3. So it's kind of this weighted scale of caseloads. So we can get a more accurate picture of the time that a learning strategist or an educational assistant puts in during their school day. So then you add all those up and establish caseloads depending on the amount of learning strategists we have at each grade level. So, and it's done consistently across the district, objectively, and then we allow for like 1 or 2 students move in per caseload, and then you set your spaces available. So
Mine was
kind
a
of
lot
a
easier.
long, drawn out, but it's systematic. It's done and that's what our legal requirement around special ed open enrollment is systematic across the district. I can provide all the documentation in order to establish these. So speech and language. So what happens if there's any student, all of our speech and language caseloads are full at each building. So if any student applies for open enrollment and even has speech and language as a related service, that capacity is at 0. So there's no open enrolled seats for that. So that would be that related service piece.
And again, this is open enrollment. It doesn't preclude a family who moves into the district. Yeah. So even though at 2nd grade, for example, we have 0 for special ed services available, if the family resides in our district, that's different. We will
That's
provide
why
services.
you kind of count, you add on to the current caseloads additional students to allow for that move-in as to your seats.
So questions about any of that? Done?
Erica, can you just summarize the financial implications for the special ed open enrollment? And do we get the same amount of money as we do for a regular ed for open enrollment?
I don't know.
And is it equal to what our,
Not necessarily. So the amount, it used to be where districts would, there was a formula we used to determine, I'll back up. You would look at the regular ed tuition for open enrollment, and then for a student that had an IEP, you would go through that IEP to determine if there were extra additional services that the district provided, which created excess cost over the regular ed tuition. And then during the open enrollment application process, we would provide an estimate to the alternate district for those costs. And then when the students actually attended the non-resident district, districts would bill each other back and forth. So if you lived in McFarland and came here, had an IEP, we incurred excess additional cost, I could bill McFarland for that cost. The law changed. It seems like the law changes all the time. But the law changed, and what they did is they just set it at a flat rate, and they set it at $12,000. I think that was last year's amount. I don't remember off the top of my head what this year's amount is, but it's just $12,000 for a student with an IEP, regardless of the needs identified in that IEP. So it could be a student that maybe doesn't really incur additional costs above and beyond what a student without an IEP would incur, or it could be a student that has pretty significant needs that could cost significantly more than $12,000.
And if we were allowed to, if we denied someone a special ed seat based on that capacity, can they come back and can they go to DPI and appeal that?
They can appeal.
They can appeal, but I don't believe you can deny based on cost anymore.
But you can deny based on
seat.
Yes,
Right.
space available.
That's why we established the
But,
seats now.
right, they can't question that then, that's, I mean, our.
Well, they can appeal it, but that's why I have all the documentation. This is the
Right.
process that we go through. It is not discriminatory based on disability. It's based on need. So, and the state allows us to do that. And if we can say we applied this consistent rule across everyone in the district.
Yeah. I remember when we put this into place. I mean, it does make it easier to turn, I mean, when you have something, you can say, no, we just can't take that on.
And I apologize, because this should have been on a discussion action, because we have to approve it in January. So what I'm going to ask is, we have a board retreat scheduled for next Monday. I'm going to ask that we have a meeting real quick before the board retreat to actually approve the numbers, because we have to approve them in January, and that was an oversight on my part, because they should have been in action discussion instead of just discussion tonight.
We'll do that. Yeah, and I was going to ask, I thought that we had to
Yes,
vote on
yeah.
that in January, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Joe?
Yeah, so it looks like basically we're at capacity almost everywhere for students with IEPs based on this. Can I infer from this that we are beyond capacity, and should we be worried about that?
I would say not at this time.
I mean, if you recall, we incorporated
Yeah.
space to add additional students.
Add additional seats of, we added on to expect that kids may move in to the district. So these numbers allow for move-ins to the district. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'm actually projecting into next year, just like like Erica projected the numbers for next year. For all the grade levels, I'm projecting special ed numbers for next year.
So if a student is referred and goes through the process to get an IEP, then we have allowed the flexibility to make sure we have capacity for them.
The added learning strats to each of the elementary buildings really helped.
It did.
So these numbers that we have to approve, that's actually for the 17-18 school
Yes.
year?
Correct.
No, 18,
18,
19.
19,
19, yeah.
Like I said, it's been a long
Yeah.
time.
It's kind of projecting out.
Right. Did you have a question, Steve? Okay.
It's really kind of tricky because it's January and we're talking about next September, which things change.
And some buildings took on, there were some buildings that took on more than the estimates of students that moved in. It's just kind of what you have to do to make your best estimate.
Did you have a question?
I have a quick question about the class size. I see, for example, 6th grade, 28, this is the limit per class. I had understood that the class size were smaller, or
Yeah, so that's where I was saying, right now, our policy target's 26, but we have, the way the math works out in that formula, if we left that at 26, there would have been 2 grade levels at the middle school that we would not have been able to allow the open enrollment into the district. And we've always taken the approach that given our declining enrollment, and we're projecting to decline again next year, we want to allow as many kids to open enroll into the district that we can. So instead of being, 1 past capacity at, I think it was like we were 1 over in 6th grade and then a couple over in 8th grade or something like that, I bumped the numbers up to allow for 28 per grade level. Our policy it sets a target of 26. It allows us to be flexible within that target. So by setting it at 28, it allows for some, you can see there's, I think, 15 and 13 at 7th and 8th grade. That way, if we have a family moving into the district and they have a child at one of those grade levels, we aren't going to, turn that family away because, we just didn't have enough space back in January.
And this assumes that everybody who's here now comes back.
Yep.
And we know, or our history has shown us that there are some people that will move out. If we get to a place where we've accepted open enrollment, let's say we accepted 13 students in 8th grade, and we got a whole bunch of move-ins, we would look at staffing capacity in the summer to look at, do we need to add staff, et cetera. So again, this is January predicting September.
The other option is to drop that back to 26, and then we would have 2 grade levels in the district that we would not allow to open enroll in.
But we do have the flexibility of either like open a new classroom, kind of like what happened in.
Correct, if we get to that point, we can have that discussion about adding staff if we get to that point where we're adding students, et cetera. So, that's the flexibility we have. If we set it, like Erica said, if we set it at 26 and we said 0 for those 2 grades, even if we had people who moved out and we had space in that grade, we couldn't accept anybody in open enrollment because officially we approved that we are accepting nobody.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. So we'll have this on the agenda for probably a single item agenda for next Monday.
Right.
Okay, thank you. So next up, 2018 Wisconsin State Convention Reflections. Several members of the board were able to go to all or part of the state convention last week. I guess what I would do is just give everybody who wants to, who was there, a couple of minutes to tell the board what you saw that you want to talk about, what you might want to share, things you might want to see us looking at as we go down the road over the next several months. So, Frank, did you go?
Yep.
Okay, why don't we start with you and we'll just go around this way.
I want to be last.
So I went, I think Joe went with me, I went to a presentation on the Florence School District that I thought was really interesting. And so Florence is in the northeast corner of the state. It's one of the state's biggest school districts. It's also really small, and it almost collapsed. I forget what the technical term for it was. But
Dissolution.
Dissolution, yes. Yeah, almost underwent dissolution, but did not. And so the presentation was from a couple of folks from Florence, I think the economic development director, and I forget who the other person was. And then the superintendent had broken his foot and couldn't come. But what they talked about, it was how they had gotten to the point where their community was unwilling to support their school district in a series of referenda, and how they built the partnerships and built the trust with the voters and brought it back. And I thought it was fascinating. And I walked out of there thinking, we got our issues. We've got declining enrollment. Talking about that, that's a continuing concern for us. We're always looking at the money, but it could be a lot worse. It was just a really neat, uplifting presentation.
All right, thank you. Steve?
I only went on Thursday. I did find it really hard to pick from all the options of sessions to go to, so I took a stab at a few. But I found very interesting, I went to the sustainability pavilion area, and there's a Green Schools program that I think might be worth looking into. The Greendale School District has done this. It's a multi-year process, but I think there's a lot of things that we're doing as a district that we could kind of synthesize and see where we're at. A Green School certification, I talked to the person who runs the program for the state. You have to apply for it, so there are some requirements you have to meet. But there would be some value, I think, to having a Green School certification for the district, and I'd be willing to kind of pursue that. So that's one of the things that I brought out of it.
All right, thanks. John?
I attended on Wednesday. I spent the bulk of my time representing Stoughton at the WASB Delegate Assembly. The Delegate Assembly was actually a lot faster and less painful.
It was pretty tame, I hear.
Yeah.
They're surprising.
Than was suggested it might be. Every resolution passed with no discussion, with the exception of 3 resolutions. The longest discussion was on a change to resolution, or the resolution that is in support of legislation that would refund public school districts for any busing that they are required by the state to do. Originally, it was for just kids going to voucher schools, but the delegate from Madison was successful in getting that amended to all private school students, not just voucher school students. So if our school district has to bus kids, WASB will now lobby that we get refunded for that cost. But the resolution that passed, also with discussion, that made me sort of think and made me concerned the most was a late resolution brought to the Assembly by the Wauwatosa School District. It passed, and the WASB will now support legislation that keeps referendum funding that is in support of facilities, either the maintenance or the building of a new building or the operation of buildings, from negatively impacting school districts in their state aid calculations. So the example, or the reason that Wauwatosa brought it up was they have a 100-year-old, I think it might be a middle school building, and it's falling apart. They want $100 million. They want the community to pass a referendum for $100 million to fund it, but if they do pass that referendum, the financial impact on their school district would actually be $145 million. So they are concerned that they might not be able to get that referendum passed because the dollar amount is much higher than what they're initially requesting of their taxpayers. And the discussion centered on whether this would be sort of pitting property wealthy districts against property poor districts. And the resolution passed, and the I guess overwhelming discussion points in the room came from people urging us to not fight each other for state dollars, since we are already being handcuffed across the board in our ability to pass referendums, and since passing a referendum is one of the last powerful additional funding mechanisms that we have at our disposal. There were a lot of people saying that we shouldn't, I don't know, we shouldn't blame the property wealthy districts for being able to raise this money themselves. But there were school districts there were representatives from property poor districts who stood up and reminded everyone that if a district like Wauwatosa is able to raise an extra $100 million to fix one of their old buildings, and the state aid does not, or the state aid balance does not reflect the fact that they then pumped $100 extra million into their school district, the property poor districts, like the representative from Milwaukee Public Schools, will not see any sort of increase in their funding. I don't know exactly where Stoughton falls in comparison to the rest of these school districts, but it didn't sit entirely well with me that that as a large organization, or as the organization representing the entirety of the school districts in our state, we are now going to be in support of legislation that would potentially sort of nullify some attempt at equity, because if Wauwatosa has a 100-year-old building that they can't, or that they're struggling to fix and struggling to find the funding to fix, the property poor districts certainly have the same issues. So to me, I don't know, it just didn't feel as cut and dry as sort of the quick vote that passed it, and it feels like something that should be on our radar, and made me consider, I guess, or pay a little bit more attention to the idea that while we are really fortunate to have a community that is willing to put additional money into our school system, I think collectively, I hope that the WASB and all of us school districts around the state will put as much effort as we can into the core problem, which is that all of us are underfunded in the state. It makes it hard for any of us to maintain our facilities and provide the education that we're legally mandated to provide. So, it was sort of eye-opening for me. And it was right at the end of the session after everybody thought that we were like just getting out. So, it was, it was interesting. But overall, it was a really good experience. I enjoyed it. So, sorry to talk for so long, but it's just been sort of like festering in my head for a few days. So, yeah.
All right, thank you, Allison.
Well, it does actually kind of dovetail into, I went on Tuesday to one of the pre-convention conferences, and then I also went for the deep dive to school finances on Thursday. That was Thursday, wasn't it? And it was interesting because I sort of came away with the same thing. It's astonishing how it seems like any effort that anybody makes to try to improve anything in their district somehow has this other effect that leaves you not really helped. And what, like you said, one of the last tools that you have is to go to referendum. And now there's even limitations on that. One of the things that I guess I had not, I'm sure we talked about it, but it just hadn't sunk in, is that if a community does go to referendum under the new laws, you can only ask 2 questions at those 2 different elections that you're allowed to do. And if you ask both of those questions at the spring election and they don't pass, you don't get to ask them again in the fall in a different format. You're done. You have to wait till the next year. So the limitations were interesting. And like you, one of the most interesting nuggets that I was hoping to talk to Erica about tonight, that of course came out as we were all trying to get to lunch and everybody was packing up to leave, is they started talking about, I guess in the next couple of months, we're going to be talking about the changes at the federal level and how that's going to affect us. So all these like nice sheets we get from DPI on, our tier 1, tier 2 and everything apparently is going to have a whole new layer at the federal level. I was going to ask you if they said that probably there would be a representative from every district going to some of these meetings, but I was going to ask you about that.
Like federal funds?
Yeah, that there was.
Through the title and those grants.
Yeah, so it's just going to be all different. And so they dropped that on us right as we were all packing up to leave, so nobody really got to ask any questions. It was another thing that was very eye-opening for me was looking at the way our revenue limits are structured is, our issue is declining enrollment. So let's say, it seemed that around the room, probably half the districts are in declining enrollment through the state. So around the room, any of the districts that were thinking, how can we change that? Almost everyone was thinking, we need more starter homes. We need more infrastructure built into what's going to help draw families into the districts. And even with that, let's say we suddenly built, a bunch of starter homes and we suddenly got 50 new kids, it's not going to help us really for 3 years. Because that's the way the funding is structured, and it's, you feel like what do you do? So, some reasonable growth needs to happen. We certainly don't want to keep going backwards, but I'm hopeful that the ad hoc committee with the city is going to be able to come up with a way to change the way we're doing this and get some more families to move here. Because we have a great school district. We really do.
Yoli?
Well, yeah, thank you. I focus on three different, basically two different, the human resources and communication and leadership. I did go to the pre-convention workshop, an overview of an integrated comprehensive system for equity that I understand Stoughton was one of the first districts who started using the system when started, I don't remember how many years ago, maybe Kelly can remember, but she wasn't in the district at that time. And I understand, Kelly, also you went through that modules, or that they call it, like where they train you to do all the system, I think. Yeah, that was through University of Wisconsin, Madison, and Whitewater. So it was very interesting, and maybe we can sometime talk a little bit more about that. And of course, I'm not gonna talk about all these things, but in every single presentation I went to, it was basically, there was basically one key thing, and I'm gonna show a little video that tells what I took out of the convention that can be useful for us. If you saw Gladiator.
You can help me. Whatever comes out of these gates, we've got a better chance of survival if we work together. Do you understand? We stay together, we survive.
So yeah, I think that was what I took out of the convention, is that we need to work together to move forward. Like you said, we have a great district, and if we work together constructively and positively, we're not just gonna survive, we're gonna excel. And I think it's from us as a board, with superintendent, the teacher, the administration, principals, everybody, the bus drivers, everybody, if we work all together and keep our vision, our district vision, we'll be okay. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Joe?
I didn't have a video to present. You're not? So I went to quite a few things. Some of them were interesting, some of them were less so. The one that I think maybe could have some direct value for us was a presentation on DAPES, which stands for District Administrator Performance Evaluation System, which was developed by CESA 6, and it seemed to be a good model for evaluating a superintendent. It seemed like it was sort of good at taking maybe some of the personal bias out of the equation, and it just was a very standardized thing that people that presented it seemed like they liked the way that it worked. And that was my kind of one thing that I thought we could actually look into using as a board.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Donna?
Well, I was there the entire time, so I actually went to quite a few presentations. I went to one on the impact of grade level configuration, which I thought would be interesting since we're looking into that. Of course, a couple of the legislative updates. I went to a session called Strategies That Improve Employee Retention, and interestingly enough, it was one of the presenters was Joanne Sternke, one of our Studer consultants, and it was really good. And it was actually kind of validating because a lot of those things we're doing here in the district, and just to see how powerful they actually are. They focused a lot on the rounding, which we've been doing pretty regularly, I believe. I also went to look at a session about board policy work and using board docs, which we now are using along with the WSB Policy Resource Guide, which I think might be pretty helpful to us on the policy committee, so I'm going to be talking with the committee about that. Building a positive leadership team. I've been to these presentations with these guys, Guy Lovett, Rachel Schultz, who is our past, Senator Schultz's spouse. Really good information, and I think it needs we need to maybe spend some time on that on a board retreat. A great session from the Sun Prairie School Board. It was titled From Chaos and Confusion to Commitment to Children, which I went up to and talked to him after the fact. The board president at Sun Prairie is now our new WASB Regional 12 director, and I suggested that maybe they want to bring that presentation to the Dane County Consortium. We're always looking for things to talk about, and he thought that was a great idea. It was focusing on how Sun Prairie Board was really kind of finding themselves kind of buried in the minutia and the management of the district, and they needed to step back and take a look at being more of a trustee than a delegate and let the district run itself by the people that know how to run the district. And it was really, really good. So I'm hoping that he can bring that forward so that maybe more people can hear that. I did go to the Bill Daggett presentation, which was really thought-provoking. I don't know if anybody has read anything about him or seen anything about him before, but I have been using things that he talked about every day, I think, since Thursday afternoon. Really taking a hard look at how we are educating our kids, because the jobs that they're going to be in are not going to exist, that we're training them for right now. And he just gave some really powerful statistics, showed some, I really hope that if we could maybe we could get his book, or he gave me, I got the site that you can look and download his presentation, but really some things that we need to think about, I think, in terms of future jobs, 2-year degrees, 2-year schools. Kids are coming out of there starting at a higher salary than they are at 4-year degree schools. The top 5 companies in 2017 are Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and some other company. 10 years ago, the only tech company that was in the top 5 was Microsoft. So what are those companies going to be in 2027? Just in 10 years, it's going to really be different. So I hope that we might challenge ourselves to think about what we're going to do in terms of, getting our kids ready for being flexible in known and unknown sets of circumstances, because it's really not about skills anymore. It's about being able to adapt and being flexible. So I don't usually like those general sessions, but that one really actually made quite an impression on me. So that was my thing, and hopefully we'll have some more chance to talk about some of these things in future meetings.
Okay, Thank you.
Don't they show that, sorry, don't they show that, like, don't they have a video or something, that it was a,
Daggett?
webpage? Because I think they, videotape it.
I don't know, I looked on their website, I didn't see anything
Oh.
like that, but, I do have a QR code that you can like go to and it'll like show all of the stuff that he would talk to, but he does he does come and talk to districts as long as you bring him in for at least a half a day. But really just some very thought-provoking things, that he brings up, so maybe.
Maybe, okay. Tim?
Allison, there.
Okay. All right, well, I'm glad that so many of us could go. I was unable to go because of work commitments last week. So next up on discussion items, policy 723, early college credit program.
Yes. So this is a policy that would be brand new. And it's as a result of the budget bill that was just passed. It's called early college credit program, and it would replace our now current youth options and course options policies, which actually were just revised last year or maybe the year before. And I'll just tell you that there is some pending legislation that may actually change this, but we have to have this in place now because we have to have it before students start selecting courses for next year. So I believe we got something from WASB. It was sort of, it came in the policy perspectives, and we whittled it down and literally kind of just took it basically word for word and created this policy along with the guidelines. So, in approving this policy, it would also be to delete 2 existing policies, which is, I know it's kind of confusing. So any questions on that?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Sure.
When do we start enrollment for next year? Because our next regular board meeting is until February 12th.
We start within the next couple weeks. They usually finalize at the end of February.
Okay. So we probably want to pass this if we're going to next Monday. Does that sound right?
I think
Or
that's
can
actually what we talked about.
Right.
Well, or can it wait till the 12th? That's my question.
It could, but it would be better if we did it next Monday.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I mean, as long as they know this is what's on the slate, but,
Right.
I mean, what we need to kind of iron out right now is there any questions on the actual substance of the policy?
Right, and I just want to make sure that we've got enough time to vote on it. Okay. So does anybody have any questions on the proposed policy 723?
So what is gonna happen is that this is gonna be in place with 721 completely, or
They will,
no really a change,
it's a brand-new policy.
Okay.
And what it is that it gives a student the ability to take up to 18 credits in a college at our expense. 75% of which I think we pay the tuition, and depending on whether or not they're taking the course for dual enrollment or college credit, they may have to pay 25% of that.
Any other questions?
No, I guess maybe then the question is, from a budgetary perspective, do we need to, because we're currently doing something along these lines.
We are, but is it a much lower rate?
Right.
The colleges and universities were charging a lot less for this option, but now they're gonna charge us what it would cost
Normal.
if a student was there. There's nothing we can do about this.
Right.
We can't say we're not gonna do it, we can't say we're only gonna let them do 3 credits. I mean, we have to allow them up to 18 credits. And then we spent a lot of time discussing how do we recoup if they do have to pay the 25% of the tuition, and they don't, how do we get that? How do we force them to pay it? we tried to put in some pretty strong language that would, you know, make someone at least think about that we wouldn't allow them to take another class until they were paid up with the last class. But, I mean, usually our policies, you know, we like to have that nice philosophical statement at the top that says, yeah, we want to do all this for the betterment, blah, blah, blah. But this one, we really were pretty strong and just said, we are mandated to offer this because it is not really a great policy.
And potentially very expensive.
Yes.
Potentially very expensive, but we do know that just, I mean, like, while we were putting this together, late last week, there is some headway on some legislation to kind of maybe curb that a little bit, but we have to move forward with this.
Okay. Well, we'll look forward to having that on as an addition to our single item agenda.
It'll be a dual item agenda.
Now two. We're not gonna do any more tonight, are we? Okay. All right, so we have one discussion action item, policy 716, assistive technology. This is a second reading. We did look at this at the last meeting. So Donna, do you wanna?
Well, I would move that we approve policy, the changes to policy 716, assistive technology, formerly known as technology concerns for students with special needs.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was Frank? Okay, thank you. Any discussion or questions on that? No.
Do we, I don't remember, do we require to hire a different person for that, or it's just, you know,
This is just to make sure that we utilize technology, which we're calling assistive technology, to help students that have special needs. It's not about hiring anyone.
So it doesn't mean that somebody has to teach them how to use that technology? It's
No.
not, okay.
Any other discussion or questions? Then I would ask for a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mr. Bouban?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Sorg?
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
President Dirks?
Yes. All right, and then that is approved. Board members, at this point, we do have grounds to move into executive session pursuant to section 19.85 sub 1 sub C sub F to consider criticisms of the performance of a building principal. I would entertain a motion to move into closed session.
So moved.
That was from Mr. Bouban. Is there a second?
Second.
From Ms. Fitzgibbon. And again, we should do this by roll call, I believe.
Mr. Bouban?
Yes.
Mr. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mr. Fry?
Yes.
Ms. Fitzgibbon?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Sorg?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Yes.
President Dirks?
Yes. All right, it's 9:26. We've been sitting here for 2.5 hours. Could we please convene upstairs at 9:35?